So far we have been talking about fractions. Now we are going to talk about factors. Do not get confused between the two. Okay, so let's look at the following equation. 2 times 3 equals 6. The numbers that are multiplied with each other to get the answer are called the factors. So 2 and 3 are the factors of 6. The number that comes after the equation sign is called the product. So 6 is the product of 2 and 3. And a product can have many factors. So if we say 2 times 3 times 4 times 5, we get 120. And in that case, 2, 3, 4, and 5 will all be factors of 120. Now, I've already told you about prime numbers. Now I'm going to tell you about prime factors. Any number can be written as the product of prime numbers. So take the 120 that we had on the previous slide. We saw that 120 had the following factors: 2, 3, 4, and 5. Now, of these, 2, 3, and 5 are prime numbers, but not 4. Because 4 itself is the product of the prime numbers 2 times 2. So what we can say is that 2 times 3 multiplied now by 2 times 2, which is the same as 4, multiplied by 5 is 120. So the prime factors of 120 is 2, 2, 2, 3, and 5. We can now use the prime factors to simplify fractions. What do? First thing we do is we write down the fraction. In this case, 12 over 30. Step 2, we write both the numbers in their prime factor form. So 12 we know is the same as 3 times 4. 3 is a prime number, but 4 is not. So we will write that as 2 times 2 times 3. 30 is the same as 6 times 5. 5 is a prime number, but 6 is not, so we'll write that as 2 times 3 times 5. Step 3, we then simply cancel all the common factors. In this case, one of the 2's on top with the 2 at the bottom, and the 3 at the top with the 3 at the bottom. What are we left with? We are left with 2/5, and now the fraction is in its simplest forms. What I want you guys to do is, by making use of prime factors, to simplify the fractions that I've given you there at the bottom. Okay, now that you know that, we are going to look at different types of fractions, and we get 3 types of fractions. The first one is if the numerator is smaller than the denominator, and those are the ones that we have been looking at so far. So if that is the case, we have a proper fraction, like in this case 12/30. But if the numerator is bigger than the denominator, we have an improper fraction. Okay? And then the third case is if a whole number stands before the fraction, it is a mixed fraction. So there we have 2, a whole number, followed by a fraction 6/12. So those are your 3 types: a proper fraction, an improper fraction, and a mixed fraction. Now, before we start doing calculations with fractions, it is important to know that any mixed fraction can be converted into an improper fraction, and so the same applies the other way around. Any improper fraction can be converted into a mixed fraction. Let's look at the first case where a mixed fraction is converted into an improper fraction. Okay, so there we have the mixed fraction 2 and 6/12. So what do? We multiply the whole number with the denominator, and then we add the current numerator to get a new numerator, but we keep the denominator the same. Let me explain it. There we have 2 and 6/12. So 12 is our denominator. We multiply 12 with 2. We take our current numerator, which is 6, and we add those together, and now we get 30. 2 times 12 plus 6 is 30, and then we write that over the denominator. Remember, the denominator is the thing that we are talking about, so it cannot change, and therefore 2 and 6/12 is the same as 30/12. If we do it the other way around, this is what we do. We divide the denominator into the numerator and we identify the rest. Then we write down the whole number and the rest will be the new numerator. But once again, the denominator, it's the thing that we are talking about. So the denominator is going to stay the same. So here we have 30 over 12. So we say 30 over 12, or 30 divided by 12, is equal to 2 rest 6. There's 6 parts left. And so we say it's 2 and the 6 parts that are left over the denominator that cannot change, that being 12. Once we know how to convert fractions, we are able to add and subtract them. Remember, we've already multiplied and divided with them, but now we are going to add and subtract them. So what's the first thing we do? We convert any mixed fractions that there might be into improper fractions. So there we have 1 1/4 plus 2 2/3. So 1 times 4 is 4 plus 1 is 5. So the first mixed fraction we are going to write as the improper fraction 5 over 4. And 2 times 3 is 6 plus 2 is 8. So we are going to write the second mixed fraction rather as the improper fraction 8 over 3. Second thing we then do is we find equivalent fractions to make sure the denominators are the same. So the first 4 multiples of 4 are 4, 8, 12, and 16. And the first 4 multiples of 3 are 3, 6, 9, and 12. And so there we identify the lowest common multiple. The first time we get a multiple that is the same is when we get to 12. So what are we going to do now? We are going to write both the original fractions in the form as something over 12. So 5 over 4 is the same as 15 over 12. How do we know that? To go from 4 to 12, we have to multiply the denominator by 3, and so we have to do the same with the numerator. 5 times 3 is 15. The same with the other one. 8 over 3, how do we move from 3 to 12? Well, we multiply with 4. If we are multiplying the denominator with 4, we must also multiply the numerator with 4, and 8 times 4 is 32. So we have 32 over 12. What do we then do? As a third step, we add or subtract the numerators, but we keep the denominator because that's again the thing that we are talking about. So 12 plus 32 is 47. So now we have 47 over 12, or 47/12. And then the last thing we do is we convert the answer back into a mixed fraction. If we take 47 and we divide it by 12, we are going to get 3 rest 11, and therefore we write it as 3/11 over 12. 3/11 over 12 rather. Okay, or 3 and 11/12. Kind of just playing with my tongue a bit there. So now that we've had a look at the theory, let's have a look at how we can apply fractions. So there we have a word sum. It says a company has 3 shareholders. Joe holds half the shares and Jim a third. And so the question is, what percentage does Sandy hold? So first thing we do is we write down the problem in fraction form. We know that the half plus a third plus something will be 1. Okay, so what do? We get the x, or the unknown, alone on the one side, and we find the equivalent fractions. So 1, we now write that as 6 over 6, minus half we write as 3 over 6 minus a third we write as 2 over 6, and then when we calculate it we get to 1/6. So Sandy holds 1/6 of the shares. And by the way, this is a question that is common in the tests and the exams. Now we've touched on this already, but just let's have a proper look at the multiplication of fractions. So what do? First thing that we do again is we convert all mixed fractions into improper fractions. So there we have a bunch of mixed fractions that we have to multiply. 1 1/4 multiplied by 2 2/3 multiplied by 3 1/5. All the cases we change the mixed fractions into improper fractions. So 5 over 4 multiplied by 8 over 3 multiplied by 16 over 5. Next thing we do is we cross cancel. Okay, so 5 goes into 5 and we can just cancel those. It's a 1 and a 1. 4 goes into itself once. It goes into 16 4 times. So what do we have left at the top? 8 times 4, and at the bottom we only have a 3 left. So we multiply the numerators with the numerators and the denominators with the denominators, and 8 times 4 is 32 over 3, and then we convert it back into a mixed fraction. 32 divided by 3 is 10, rest 2, so we write it as 10 2/3. That was the multiplication of fractions. Now we can have a look at the division of fractions. So what do we do when we divide fractions? First thing, once again, like always, is we convert the mixed fractions into improper fractions. So 1 1/4 divided by 2 2/3 divided by a fifth is the same as 5/4 or 5/4 divided by 8/3 divided by a fifth. Then the second thing we do is we change all the division signs into multiplication signs and we invert. And to invert means to swap the numerator and the denominator. So we say 5/4 instead of divided by 8/3 we say multiplied by 3/8, and instead of saying divided by 1/5 we say multiplied by 5, or just 5 over 1. What we then do is we multiply the numerators with the numerators and the denominators with the denominators once again. So 5 times 3 times 5 is 25, and 4 times 8 times 1 is 32, and we can't really simplify this anymore because there are no common factors. Okay.